Google is a snake eating its own tail. Wow, right? That is a direct, chilling quote straight from our source material today, and it just perfectly frames the massive, almost invisible architectural failure happening right beneath our screens. We're currently trapped in this built-in paradox where the ultimate answer engine is mathematically destined to consume its own food supply. So, welcome to the 0 point. Today, we aren't just looking at software updates, we're going to conduct a deep architectural autopsy on the internet itself. Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we are embarking on a totally fascinating forensic descent right into the heart of human intent and machine execution. By synthesizing the magic of authorship curriculum, we're going to trace the genesis of human creation all the way down to the bare metal mechanics of the microchips processing our world. Here is how we're navigating this descent. First up, the genesis of authorship. Second, the 1689 breach. Third, the metadata miasma. Fourth, the dead internet spiral. And fifth, the record of sweat. Let's jump right in. Section 1, the genesis of authorship. We are shattering the modern illusion of the lone genius. You know, there is just a massive contrast between our modern assumptions and historical reality. Today, we naturally picture an author as this solitary, romantic genius, locked away in a room, magically conjuring up brilliant ideas entirely out of thin air. But our sources reveal that this whole lone inventor myth, it's actually a strategic narrative. It was constructed centuries later specifically to help enclose intellectual property. The ancient reality was deeply collaborative. Authors were seen more as weavers or dreamers, acting as channels for pre-existing truths, working a giant loom of language. So authorship was fundamentally a multi-step, deeply physical team effort. You had the initial divine inspiration, then the author's translation, the singer literally giving the words breath, and finally the scribe painstakingly copying it down. Without this physical, biological chain of effort, without the singer's voice or the scribe's hand, the author essentially didn't exist. This biological rhythm, this tangible physical labor, is exactly what the sources call the original record of sweat. Moving to Section 2. The 1689 breach, a sociological regression in cloud computing. So how on earth did we lose that connection? Well, when you look at the timeline of human infrastructure, you start to see a recurring historical battle to protect local agency from absolute power. The 1648 Treaty of Westphalia, the 1689 Orange Pledge, and even Paul Revere's 1775 Midnight Ride. These were all explicit, hard-won actions to check centralized royalist control. Now, the 21st century battle over massive AI server farms maps perfectly onto these exact historical fights. Cloud computing isn't just some tech trend, it's a sociological counter-revolution, attempting a massive centralized enclosure of our digital commons. The really crucial point here is a concept the researchers call agentic kingship. It is the aggressive restoration of unaccountable centralized power. Massive tech giants operate through something called interface inversion. Instead of you using a tool directly to compute, they sit squarely between you and your execution. They turn the absolute basic right of computation into a metered royal utility, acting like digital monarchs who monitor every single prompt you make. Right now, we're facing two totally competing network visions. First, the centralized cloud empire, which is the pipe. It literally just sucks data from you into a massive corporate tank. In the pipe, you are essentially a caged digital tenant, being fed nuts by a landlord. But the alternative is the forest. This is a decentralized, constituent-owned topology, where you are a sovereign participant at the edge of the network, storing your own data and running your own local AI entirely on your own terms. All right, Section 3, the metadata miasma. Let's look at the bare metal mechanics of data destruction. To really understand why that pipe model is so incredibly dangerous, we literally have to look inside the physical brain of your computer. Down at the metal level, there's a massive clash between two completely different philosophies. On one side, you have the FPU gambler, the floating point unit. It is lightning fast, but it's probabilistic. It relies on secret corporate seed tables to essentially make highly educated guesses. Staggeringly, 80 to 90% of modern AI compute cycles run on this guessing FPU. On the exact opposite side, we have the ALU surveyor. It is strictly deterministic. 1 + 1 = exactly 2, absolutely every single time, globally. When we rely heavily on the FPU gambler, we trigger what's called the wood chipper effect. It permanently shreds the exact provenance of your data, turning the sharp reality of human effort into this uncredited, foggy smoothie. And the real-world consequences of this hardware non-determinism, absolutely devastating. Just look at the 2020 DDX digital data exchange credit crisis. 2.7 million. Because automated probabilistic systems completely failed to keep a deterministic record, 2.7 million albums were left just floating in an uncredited abyss. Millions of records where the session musicians, the audio engineers, and the independent writers were completely disconnected from the actual money that their human labor generated. And this extraction is accelerating wildly. $2 billion. That is the staggering projected annual ad revenue loss for digital publishers and independent creators right now. Why is this happening? Because AI-generated overviews and autonomous zero-click searches are just swallowing all the traffic. The machines guess the math, they summarize the human thought, and the actual paycheck meant for the human creator simply evaporates into the miasma. Which brings us to Section 4, the dead internet spiral, crossing the threshold of synthetics. Our sources outline some very strict physical laws of digital duplication here. Basically, errors can be fixed, but only if the noise remains less than 50%. Once the internet gets flooded with AI-generated content and crosses that 50% terminal synthetic noise threshold, the original human signal is permanently lost to algorithmic distortion. Semantic meaning collapses entirely, and doubt just becomes the default state of the web. Think about it. When was the last time you weren't totally sure if an article you were reading was written by a human or a bot? We are already right up against that threshold. Let's actually walk through exactly how this happens, step by step, with what's called the Erebos timeline. First, a human writes an original, authentic thought. Second, the AI model summarizes it, completely stealing the traffic. Third, deprived of revenue, the human expert site is forced to shut down. Fourth, because that human source is gone, the next generation of AI is literally forced to train on its own lossy, degraded summary. And finally, total semantic collapse. The tech monopoly's business model mathematically forces its own engine to eat its own degraded output. That is the literal definition of the snake eating its own tail. Finally, Section 5, the record of sweat, striking back as the sovereign pilot. Now, we aren't just going to accept defeat and watch the internet die, right? The ultimate resolution presented here is sovereign compute. It is the absolute rejection of the digital landlord. Instead of being a tenant who rents the right to think from the cloud empire, you anchor your human intent directly to a physical substrate that you actually own. You make your digital legacy as private and legally untouchable as your physical front door. To pull this off, developers are using something called chopsticks engineering. It's a brisk, highly deterministic three-step process. Step 1, you secure the physical substrate by literally owning the local hardware sitting right on your desk. Step 2, you publish your unalterable intent using a bit-perfect mathematical record. And Step 3, you bypass that guessing gambler entirely and execute locally using the exact, undeniable ALU surveyor. This process perfectly bridges associative human thought with exact hardware truth, ultimately restoring the true magic of authorship. And the good news? Independent creators actually have a massive arsenal at their disposal right now for this 2026 strike. They can operate agentic publishing houses using tools like the EGPL protective shell, which is essentially a poison pill, forcing monopolies to open source stolen code. We have CSR automated micro royalties paying out right at the silicon level, alongside X402 lifeboats and Leaf node logistics, all ensuring that your execution stays strictly local. So as these centralized systems aggressively attempt to enclose every single aspect of our digital lives, you are left facing a massive infrastructural choice. Will you succumb to the cloud enclosure and remain a passive digital tenant, quietly renting your cognitive capabilities from an invisible tech monarch? Or will you secure your own hardware, claim the record of your sweat, and ride as a sovereign pilot of your own machine? The future of your digital freedom is entirely up to you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the architecture around you.